I saw something that morning that no one else seemed to notice. As the sun rose slowly behind the dry Texas fields, everyone was leaving, except him. The tractors had already stopped. The house was empty. The barn locked. But the dog was still there, sitting in the exact same spot, by the old wooden gate, staring at the dirt road as if someone were going to return at any second. People said, "He doesn't understand. He's just a dog. It's been too long." But I knew, in that gaze, there was waiting. And it wasn't an ordinary wait. It was raw loyalty, the kind that hurts. Everyone had given up on that man. The farm had been forgotten. But that dog, he hadn't. And it was right there, standing just a few feet from him, that I realized. Some promises don't need words. They live in the silence. This is a story about loyalty, regret, and the things we only understand when it's already too late. My name is, and you are at Moments That Matter, a channel where we tell simple stories from the American heartland. Stories that carry profound truths about family, faith, animals, and the choices we make. If you believe that some stories aren't just for entertainment, but for healing, subscribe now. And stay with me until the end. Because what this dog did in the end changed everything I thought I knew about love. I met old Samuel Hayes on a hot summer afternoon, back when there was still laughter on that farm. He was the silent type, thick hands, his hat always perfectly set, a man of few words. The dog showed up shortly after. A large mutt, mottled fur, a watchful gaze. Samuel found him near the road, thin, scared, but determined not to leave. I never saw Samuel call that dog by a name. Even so, they understood each other. The animal followed him everywhere. In the corral, in the barn, on the porch at dusk. It wasn't obedience. It was a choice. Bond. As the weeks went by, I began to realize that the bond between Samuel and that dog was unlike anything I had ever seen. There were no commands. There were no rewards. Only presence. Samuel woke up before the sun, like every countryman. He'd barely put on his boots, and the dog would already be sitting by the door. Still, attentive, as if that were the most important job of the day. He didn't wag his tail. He didn't make a fuss. He just waited. In the corral, while Samuel checked the cattle, the dog would always position himself a few feet away. He never got in the way. He never strayed too far. It was as if he knew exactly where he was supposed to be. At night, when the work was done, Samuel would sit in the old rocking chair on the porch. The dog would lie at his feet, head resting on his paws, watching the sky change colors. Sometimes they stayed like that for hours without exchanging a single gesture. I never saw Samuel pet that dog. But I also never saw him close the door without checking to see if he was there. It was a bond built in silence, like many true friendships in the countryside. No words. No spoken promises. Still, you could feel it. If one of them got lost, the other would never move on in the same way. Clouds. The first changes were almost invisible. Small things that only those who truly observe can notice. Samuel started walking slower. He would stop in the middle of the pasture, leaning his hands on his knees, taking deep breaths. He said it was just the heat, but I knew it wasn't. His children showed up less and less. When they did come, they didn't stay long. They talked about bills, selling part of the land, about opportunities far away. Samuel listened in silence, his gaze lost on the horizon. The dog never left his side during those days. He seemed to sense the tension in the air. When the conversations grew harsh, the animal would move even closer, pressing his body against Samuel's leg, as if to say, "I'm here." The barn began to show signs of neglect. Tools out of place. Doors creaking more than usual. And even without anyone saying it out loud, we all knew something was about to change. The sky seemed to feel it, too. The clouds came in heavier. The wind carried that scent of a storm that the countryside never gets wrong. And the dog watched it all. Attentive. In silence. The day began like any other, but it ended unlike anything else. It was early when I heard the sound of the ambulance coming up the dirt road. The dust scattered through the air like an omen. Samuel tried to walk out of the house on his own, proud as always, but his body failed him. He fell to his knees before reaching the gate. The dog ran to him, barked, circled around, clearly in a panic. When the paramedics arrived, they tried to push him away, but the animal resisted. I had never seen that dog bark like that. When they put Samuel on the stretcher, the dog tried to climb in with him. He scratched the side of the ambulance. He cried. Someone closed the door. The ambulance drove off, and the dog stayed there, standing still, watching the road disappear into the horizon. "He'll be back," someone said. But the dog didn't move. He sat down by the gate. And he stayed. Samuel never returned to the farm. His children handled everything from a distance. The house was closed up. The land was put up for sale. Work, money, and haste spoke louder than memory. They said someone would come to get the dog. They said many things. And I believed them. That was my mistake. I drove past that road several times. I saw the dog there, always in the same spot. I thought about stopping, but there was always something urgent. Work, schedules, commitments. Someone will take care of it, I told myself. Meanwhile, the dog kept waiting. He didn't beg for food. He didn't bark for attention. He simply remained. It was then that I understood how good humans are at abandoning, and how terrible we are at taking the blame. Wait, the days began to pile on top of one another. The sun beat down during the day. At night, the cold took over the road, and the dog stayed there. Sometimes someone would leave water, sometimes a piece of bread, but no one stayed. Time passed, the seasons changed, and the world moved on. But he didn't. Always looking at the road, always waiting, as if love could keep someone alive, even after they're gone. I went back to that farm months later, before the new owners had arrived. The place seemed smaller, as if it had shrunk without Samuel there. I entered the house through the back door, the one that was always left unlocked. The smell of old wood and dust was still there. Everything remained almost the same, except for the heavy silence. In the bedroom, a forgotten drawer caught my eye. Inside, I found yellowed papers, old bills, and a carefully folded letter. I recognized the handwriting immediately. Samuel had written it to himself. It wasn't a goodbye, but a reminder. He spoke of the loneliness after his wife died. He spoke of the long nights, the weight of age, and the day he thought about giving up on everything. That was when he wrote about the dog. He showed up when I wasn't talking to anyone anymore. He sat by my side and stayed, without asking for anything. The last line paralyzed me. If one day I don't come back, I hope someone is as loyal to him as he was to me. I closed the letter, my hands trembling. In that moment, it all made sense. The waiting, the silence, the faithfulness. It wasn't confusion. It was a promise being kept. I took the dog with me that very day. He got into the car without resistance, as if he knew it was time to go. He didn't look back as we left the farm. He just moved forward, calm, tired, whole. Before heading home, I made one last detour. The hospital was nearly an hour away. I didn't know exactly what I expected to find, but I felt I had to do it. I entered the room where Samuel had spent his final days. It was empty now. The bed was made too neatly, cold. The dog walked in slowly. He sniffed the floor, then the bed, and then he lay down. There was no barking. There was no crying. Only silence. He stayed there for a few minutes, motionless, as if he were finally closing something that needed to be lived through to the very end. When he stood up, he came over to me and leaned his head against my leg. In that simple gesture, I understood. The waiting was over. The dog stayed with me. I didn't try to change who he was. I didn't try to rush anything. In the first few days, he would still sit by the gate at dusk. He would look at the road, but without that old tension. Now there was rest in his gaze. The farm was sold. The barn demolished. The house renovated. But something remained. Whenever the sun sets and the sky turns that deep orange, he lies down beside me and watches the horizon. And I let him. People who pass by here ask about him. I just tell them he came from the countryside. I don't explain everything. Some stories don't need to be told out loud. They live in gestures, in the way he trusts, in the way he remains. That dog became the last guardian of something the world is forgetting: commitment. I learned too late that loyalty doesn't depend on words, contracts, or promises said out loud. It depends on presence. While we run after the next appointment, the next game, the next place, there are those who stay. There are those who wait. Samuel found that at the end of his life. I found it after everything ended. That dog taught me that some connections don't die with absence. They survive in silence, in time, and in the daily choice not to leave. If you're listening to this story now, maybe you're also carrying a weight, a regret, a memory that still hurts. Know this: true love was never about possession. It was about remaining, even when no one else stays. Maybe this story reminded you of someone, or of something you left behind, thinking time would solve it on its own. The truth is that not everything heals with haste. Some wounds only ask for presence. Some promises only survive when someone decides to stay. If you've ever felt forgotten, if you've ever waited for something that never came back, know that your feelings are real, and you are not alone in this. Sometimes, life doesn't ask us for grand gestures. It only asks that we don't abandon what still matters. If this story touched your heart, write it in the comments. Your story might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And subscribe to Moments That Matter. Here, we believe that simple stories of farms, family, faith, and loyalty still have the power to heal. Until the next moment that truly matters.